That's
Good afternoon and welcome. You're listening live to Heart-to-Heart, a program which aims to help you understand and to become your loving self at KMET 1490 AM ABC News Live. This is Dr. Mitra Rashidian. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified sexologist. I'm offering this program along with my colleague, Dr. Robert Jaffe, business partner and my wonderful friend of many years, talking today about codependency, and which we know is a disease of falsehood. We have talked about this condition many times when our program was actually broadcast there at 9 o'clock on Friday mornings, which we recently switched back to this hour. So we would like to welcome our new listeners and also those that they have followed us. We appreciate that, and we're glad that we can join you and thank you for sharing your hour with us this afternoon. So, Dr. Robert Jaffe.
So yes, thank you for that wonderful introduction.
My pleasure.
Codependency. We've talked about it many times, as Dr. Rashidian just mentioned. We call it the disease of lost selfhood.
Right.
I want to say that one other meaning of the word disease is you can actually split it in two, and you can say dis-ease. So dis-ease means you're out of ease or you're not feeling good. You're feeling out of sorts. And that's what codependence is. It's a feeling inside of you that that something isn't right and you're not quite complete.
Exactly.
And so where does that come from? How does that manifest? As I said, we've talked about it many times. I consider it probably the most overlooked and underdiagnosed addiction.
Right.
And it's really an addiction to the idea that something outside of you can make you feel whole. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. Something outside of me. So it can be something outside of me, or someone outside of me. I need that person in order for me to feel complete. What addictions do is they make us feel good temporarily. They give us a sense of high. They give us relief from any uncomfortable feelings that we have. All addictions do that. So drugs and alcohol, that's pretty obvious. You get a euphoric feeling when you're using drugs and alcohol. And so you get relief from any negative feelings that you're carrying inside of you. Drugs and alcohol are chemical dependencies that you can have, so that you start using them and you get that euphoric feeling, but after a while you need more and more of it to get that same euphoria. So that's a chemical dependency. Then we have what we call process addictions. And process addictions are when you're not actually taking in a substance. Smoking, of course, is a substance, so that's not a process addiction. What would be a process addiction? Gambling would be a process addiction. Why do people get compulsive gamblers? Because they get a high from the adrenaline rush and the norepinephrine that goes into the brain. When you're taking that risk and you're wondering at that moment, am I going to win or am I going to lose? What we now know from gambling addiction is that the outcome is much less important than the fact that the person is getting a high from the actual process itself.
Exactly. One thing that you just mentioned, that part of codependency, right, is that, we look at for the approval from outside, right? And I think, that is something that at the level of society, it's not recognized as a problem,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. I mean, the problem, the way I think of it is the problem is not that we enjoy other people's approval or other people's applause. I think that's a normal thing, and we do like to please other people generally as human beings. We like to get positive feedback. We much prefer people smiling with us than frowning at us. That's a normal state. But what we're talking about with codependency is that if we don't get it, then we feel like there's something wrong with us,
Right.
and we need to get it.
Right.
And we need to get it now. And so in that way, it becomes like a fix.
Right.
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 It fixes us. It makes us feel worthwhile. It makes us feel lovable. It makes us feel good.
Exactly. And then, we see that people complain that, oh, I need him or her in my life to feel complete.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And
exactly.
then we see that, through media, singing, programs on TV and things like that, that's actually kind of promoted.
It does. It does. Yeah. So what happens with codependence is, like all addictions, it is a progressive disease. There's different stages of codependence. And as the person becomes more and more codependent in the relationship, negative things happen to their body as well as to their relationships. I always use the joke that codependency is when you go to bed with your partner in the evening, and you wake up in the morning and you look at him or her and say, "Good morning, how am I?" Because basically you're relying on them to tell you whether you're okay or not. And if they give you the thumbs up, then you could feel good. And if they give you the thumbs down, then you don't feel good.
Exactly.
The extreme of codependence is when you walk by somebody on the sidewalk and you smile at them and they don't smile back, right? They don't smile back. Now, you could look at that and you could say, okay, well, they're not smiling back. Maybe they got something else on their mind, or maybe something bad has happened in their life, or maybe they're not. They don't even recognize that I was doing it. They're off somewhere in their own little world. And that would be a logical adult assumption. People who are very codependent, however, are seeking out the approval. So when they go and they smile at somebody, and that person doesn't smile back, it's a statement that there's something wrong with them, with not with the person who didn't smile back, but with them.
With them.
Yeah. What's wrong with me? Is my hair out of place? Am I not dressed right? Do I have cooties? What's wrong with me? And they can begin to do that, or they turn it around and they say, what's wrong with him?
Right.
Say, and then they become projective and start imagining that he's very unkind. He's a bad person. He's an SOB. Things like that.
Right. I actually have a few clients like that. Like one of them, for example, she's in and out of relationships. Her relationship don't last more than a week long.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the relationship is over, I mean, that's not even a relationship, but she calls them her relationships. She comes in and she says, well, what's wrong with me?
Mm-hmm.
Why he didn't stay with me?
Mm-hmm.
What did I do wrong?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I hear that, significantly, these two sentences, what's wrong with me and, what did I do wrong? Or I'm not good enough, or things like that, significantly, I hear them in therapy, in particular when the relationships are not going well.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And of course, it's important to understand that when we ask a question, our mind goes on search for the answer. So if I am asking the question, what's wrong with me? The underlying assumption is that there is something wrong with me. And then it's simply a matter of discovering what that is. And then I can pick out certain things that I feel insecure about, or that I know are not my strengths, and I can say, oh, it's this about me. You know, I don't have a good sense of humor.
Right.
I'm not very smart. I don't know about this particular subject.
Or I'm not thin enough, or I'm not pretty enough.
Exactly.
Or
Yeah.
I'm not exciting enough, or I'm not attractive enough.
Right.
You know,
And the key word, of course, is
I am not.
enough.
Yeah,
I'm
enough.
not enough.
Enough.
Right.
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
not enough. Yeah.
Right.
So, so I was saying earlier that codependence goes in different stages. In the middle and later stages of codependence, it creates physical stress within us. The physical stress is, I hope and I pray that my significant other is going to still love me. Now, this, like other addictions, is generally subconscious. So when I'm talking about this, you may say, well, I don't think that, or I don't feel that way. And that may be because you're not codependent. It also may be because it's subconscious and you're not aware that that's at the root of what's going on for you. So we're trying a little deeper level here and talk about what's going on subconsciously. We believe that the subconscious runs the show, meaning that the subconscious informs how we think about things, how we feel about things, and ultimately it leads to behaviors that conform with those beliefs and thoughts. And if those beliefs and thoughts are out of alignment and not correct, know it. We act on it anyway.
Right.
One of the definitions of insanity that I learned in the 12-step program for addictions was doing the same behavior over and over again, expecting a different result. And so I can say the same is true for codependency, is that we keep searching for that person to approve of us, and we feel good when they do, and the person, if they're codependent on us, also wants our approval.
Mhm.
So they're giving us approval, even if deep down they don't really feel like they want to approve of what we're thinking or feeling or doing, but they're going to say it anyway, and then we're going to give them back the same thing, and then after a while you have a relationship that's not built on truth. It's built on liking the other person.
Right. Right. And then usually the issue of codependency, and I don't know if you're going to go into that direction or not, begins since childhood.
Correct.
Right. And
Correct.
Childhood abuse. And the way of life, the way that the child grows up, and it's not all about parents. We know that, it starts with the family of origin, but then again, there are many other contributing factors in a smaller society and a larger society that, shapes a person's personality in a form of codependency.
Right. And so codependency then is an extension of dependency, right? Dependency starts when we're little and we can't take care of ourselves, right? So what do we need when we're tiny, when we're an infant, when we're a toddler, when we're a young child, 4, 5, 6 years old? What do we need the most?
Care and love, security.
Care and love, security, and safety.
Yeah.
Right? And so if we are safe, then we feel good. And if we're unsafe, we don't feel good. But who do we turn to give us that feeling of safety? And it's our caretakers. Right? Our caretakers, our caregivers. And let's just say, for sake of argument, it's mom and dad. Right? So in an intact family, it becomes the parents who are responsible for taking care of the children. The children know that they can't take care of themselves, and so they are dependent on the parent. What happens then if they don't have that parent to take care of them, either physically or emotionally? So what happens if the parent is absent and not taking care of the child physically or emotionally? The child starts to panic, right? And if the child starts to panic, the child then develops methods of getting the attention of the parent, so that the parent can then take care of them. And the biggest method, of course, is when the child cries.
Mm-hmm.
So the child cries, the parent hears the child cry, and the parent attends to the child, and then the child gets to be taken care of. Now, what happens if the crying doesn't result in the child getting taken care of? And then, of course, then that creates other problems, and we're going to get into that. We just got that we're about to take our first break. We'll go back into this, and then what we're going to be talking about during the rest of the program is how codependence morphs into physical illness.
Please call us 95. Welcome back from our commercial break. This is Heart to Heart program at KMET 1490 AM ABC News Radio. Dr. Mitra and Dr. Robert here. For those of you who are just joining us, our discussion for this segment is about codependency, the disease of false
lost selfhood.
Lost selfhood. Right, exactly. Yes. I got kind of stuck in there saying that. Okay. And of course, Dr. Jaffe, being an expert in addictions, he's the right person to share with us about, what codependency is and how it impacts our lives in many, many, many areas, and without even us noticing that.
Exactly, because right. we're not trained therapists, and because honestly, our society has been sort of acculturated to encourage that. Right. As a romantic notion that the two of us are really just one.
That's what I meant. At the beginning, that society, says that we are a pair in two parts. Or I mean, look at the poems, look at all the advertising, look at the even greeting cards, look at the jewelry. They have two broken pieces of art. You put it together. The rings or anything that's romantic, many of them in so many ways are just promoting codependency.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. You're my better half.
You're my better half.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
I went to Arizona the other last year or so, and then I was walking by myself, and then a couple were coming from the front. And they saw me earlier, of course, and they said, "Oh, where is your better half? No, where is your other half? Where is your other half?" And I was kind of paused and said, "Oh, okay." I said, "My other half is taking a nap."
Yeah. So it sounds romantic, and certainly it's a romantic notion, and it can be pleasant as a romantic notion. The problem, of course, is that it gives a subconscious message that you're not enough by yourself.
By yourself, yes.
Right. It's interesting because you're mentioning that. I've always been amused that sometimes when I go into a restaurant by myself, they look at me and they go, "Just one?"
Exactly. And that's one of the reasons that I don't like to do that by myself either. My daughter, when she was single before she got married, that was one of the issues. And she's a very independent young woman. And she wanted to do this. And she was, very explorative kind of a person. She liked to go to new places and all of that. And then she would call me very, very angry and, disappointed and said, Mom, this is so wrong. And I said, well, what's going on? I said, I'm going to restaurant. This is a new restaurant. I want to see what it's like and everything. And then when I'm calling, they said, oh, you just won. What's wrong with just being one?
Right, right. So yeah, and for me, I think it's amusing. And when it happens and they say just one, I say, no, not just one, one. So
Yeah, I mean, I have young clients here that they say when they're not in a relationship, and I tell them, but the subject calls for that, and I tell them, you know what, or what you can do that by yourself, and they said, oh, by myself, how can you go to a restaurant just by yourself?
yeah, yeah.
I said the same way you go with a group, the same way you go with another person, you just go by yourself. And then they're telling me, mostly female, that they're not going to offer you a good seat because the good seats are taken for couples, So they're going to sit you,
Yeah,
in a corner or
another way
bar,
of saying second class.
second class.
Second class. Yeah, you're by yourself. You're second class.
Second class. Yeah. And that's really sad. It's really sad.
It is. But the reason we're talking about it is because it goes to the notion that you're not enough. Right. That there's something wrong with you.
And even in movie theaters, you have noticed that there is usually a single chair, separate from the rest of the chairs.
What do you mean?
There's just a seat that's only single seat. It's not connected to the rest of the row.
Oh, you mean there's just on the very end.
On the very end.
Yeah, exactly. For those of you who are not able to have a partner, we'll sit you here.
We sit you there, and
we'll make an accommodation.
Yes, and it's just like singling at the single people that they're not in relationship, and that's not fair. That's not right.
Well, it isn't right, and it also sends the message that you need to be different than where you are.
Yes.
Right. And that's so. Let's go back to because at the break I said when we come back we're going to be talking about how codependence is connected and often turns into physical illness, and people don't really recognize that. But we now know that emotions cause very, very strong reactions in the body, right? We've always known that happens, but we haven't ever recognized the degree to which it happens and how it can inform our physical health. If you talk to many doctors, they will say that the majority of the people that they see, and this is what we've learned in psychology as well, that the majority of the people that we see that come in for physical complaints are psychogenic in origin. Now, there's a difference between psychogenic and psychosomatic. Psychosomatic means basically that you have a psychological symptom that's being felt in the body. Psychogenic means that the symptom is actually is happening in the body and creating problems, but that it's psychologically that it has its origin in psychological stress. So we find people often who come from abusive backgrounds who have a lot who are carrying a lot of fear and a lot of stress that has affected their body over time, and they actually become sick.
Right.
And one of the things that we've recognized, and we've talked about in here, but it doesn't hurt to bring it up again, is that, and actually in our previous program, the one that we just ended, we were talking about stress, and stress being either eustress,
right,
which means stress coming from positive anticipation, or distress means that stress coming from a negative anticipation. Right. So one of the things that we've learned is that when we are carrying distress, meaning that there's fear inside of us, that there's shame, that there's guilt, that there's unexpressed anger, sometimes unexpressed rage, and of course sadness is a big one. that it causes changes in the body. And if those changes persist over a period of time, it lowers our immune system. And this is something that's very, very important because our immune system is our defense against the um, billions of little creatures that are around us and on us all the time. If you said this 500 years ago, that there are billions of creatures that are on you at any time and at any moment they could attack you and cause you to be sick, you would have them committed, or worse yet, you'd have them beheaded.
Yes.
Right?
Right. Yes.
Because there was no proof of that, and it's contra-intuitive.
Right.
Right? None of our senses can sense that there are all these billions of germs around us all the time. But there are, and our bodies have developed over the millions of years that we've been around. We've developed ways of combating those, and that is caused, and that we call our immune system. And everybody's immune system works to keep them healthy. But when you are carrying negative emotions, especially over a long period of time, it attacks the immune system. And the immune system becomes weakened, and then what we call opportunistic germs or diseases go in, and our bodies are unable to fight them, and then we come down with illness. So a lot of what we're talking about now is, okay, so if you come from a dysfunctional background, dysfunctional simply means that your physical and or emotional needs were not met.
Right.
Right. We were talking about codependency a moment ago. So codependency is the child is dependent and their emotional needs aren't met. What are their emotional needs? To feel safe. And so if the parent starts to hover over them, we call them helicopter parents. If they hover over the child and they're always watching to make sure that the child doesn't hurt themselves, the child then doesn't learn how to make distinctions as to what might hurt them or not, because the parent is doing that for them. And so then the child becomes dependent on someone else making those decisions for them.
Right. Yes.
On the other hand, if the parent isn't watching out for the child at all, the child may make some bad decisions and get injured, and then the child becomes afraid to be on their own because they don't trust themselves. So the parent has to find that fine line where they're not hovering over the child and they're allowing the child to make decisions, but they're also watching the child to make sure that they don't really get hurt.
Well, that takes, lots of skill to be able to recognize that, because parents who are helicopter parents, they believe that they're actually, protecting their child. What they don't realize is that they are disabling the child.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? Because if the child doesn't learn the skills necessary at any, life stage that they have in order to take care of themselves,
yes,
then in adulthood, they are dependent on their partner or somebody else,
right,
for their safety, for their happiness, for everything in
right.
life.
And so if they grow up, that's a prelude to codependency, because let's say they have parent A who's the helicopter child, then they're wanting their spouse to do that. Right. They're wanting their spouse to make decisions for them. They're wanting their spouse to always weigh in on what they think, and then they defer to what the spouse thinks. Or if they didn't get enough supervision as a child, then they want their spouse to make up for what they didn't get. So they're trying to pull their spouse in and still help them, because they're feeling isolated and alone, and they want someone to make up for what their parent didn't give them.
Exactly. And we see that many of that conflict in relationships, and how the needs are not met, and then the expectations are there, and therefore the conflicts are there.
Right. So what this brings us to is what I would like to talk about, which is the idea of emotionally immature parents.
Okay.
Okay. Emotionally immature parents are parents who didn't get what they needed as a child and never learned how then to give it to their children. So an emotionally immature parent then needs their child's approval and becomes codependent on the child. So so then the child feels that the parent is needy, and because the child is dependent on the parent in order for the parent to take care of them, because they can't meet their own needs, they can't go out and make a living, and they can't cook or do things for themselves, then they begin to caretake the parent, and because they sense that the parent is insecure and needs their protection. This happens a lot, an awful lot. And so then the child learns not to express what they are seeing or noticing, because it might hurt the parent's feelings.
And we do have a lot of that.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the parent then is relying on the child to validate them, and the child feels pressured to tell the parent what they want to hear. Now, that's a recipe for codependence.
Right.
So, emotionally wounded or emotionally unhealthy parents don't give the child what they need in order to feel secure within themselves, and in order to pick a partner who is also secure within themselves. So what they do then is they feel insecure, and then they pick a partner who is most likely also insecure, often in the same way that the parent was.
Exactly.
And they recreate
Yes.
that dysfunctional relationship.
Yes. And that's when we say, the subconscious runs the show, which is the name of our other book that we are writing.
Yes.
That's exactly what it is. We follow the pattern that we are familiar with.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
If we have an abusive father, we pick an abusive husband. If we have an abusive mom, we pick an abusive wife. Right? So the cycle goes on because this is how we learn subconsciously how to live, how to survive, and how to interact, and how to communicate.
Absolutely. So and so when you were saying that, I was flashing on a woman that I work with a number of years ago, who came in, and in the first session she said, "Well, I'm not happy in my relationship." And I said, "Okay, well, tell me about it." And she said, "Well, my husband, he hardly ever works. When he works, he can't hold a job. So I support the two of us financially." She says he doesn't really do anything around the house. He doesn't watch the kids. So that's up to me to watch the kids, and also I hire a babysitter because I don't trust him alone with the kids. So what does he do? He sits around and he drinks beer and he watches television.
What a life.
And she said, I don't know what to do. And I said, so I have a question. She says, what's that? And I said, why you're with them? And guess what her answer is?
I don't know.
Well, I love him.
Yeah.
I love him. And I said, well, why do you love him? And then her answer was, well, at least he doesn't beat me.
Yes.
And
wow,
on that note,
that's a chilling
on that note,
yes.
we will come back and talk a little more about that, because this is very interesting.
It's very interesting. So please join us back after commercial break, and don't forget to call us 951-922-3532.
We'll see you in a few moments.
Welcome back from our commercial break. This is Heart-to-Heart program at KMET 1490 AM ABC News Radio. Dr. Mitra and Dr. Robert offering you a program in this segment about what is codependency, how it happens, and what it does to us. And this is such a broad and fascinating topic that we're going to be talking about this for weeks ahead. And then we would like to hear from you and your experiences, and then those that that they may be suffering from this condition. And this is so, expanded in our society that it's not even noticed, but we know that how it impacts in lives in a negative form. So our phone number live here is 951-922-3532. Dr. Robert Jaffe.
So I was telling a story of a client that I saw a number of years ago. I'll repeat it briefly.
Right, right.
Yeah. So a woman comes into my office, says she's unhappy in her relationship. I ask her to talk about it, and she tells me that basically the husband doesn't do anything. That he does get a job and he works for a week or two, and then they lay him off or he quits, and that mostly what he does is he sits around, drinks beer, doesn't help with the kids, and watches television while she's out working to support them. She hires a babysitter, because she doesn't trust him. And I ask her, well, why are you with him? And she says, I love him. And I said, well, why do you love him? And she says, well, at least he doesn't beat me.
Wow.
And so that, of course, opened up the whole thing about, so what she's doing then is she's equating physical safety um, with physical safety with a secure foundation to have a relationship with somebody. And of course, that is a necessary component. You certainly need to be physically safe in the relationship. But if it ends there, you're not going to be happy, because we need a lot more than physical safety in order to
Yes.
have an intimate, close, loving relationship, right? So then what we have to do, and what I had to do with her, was to help her to recover from not only the abuse she suffered by being with men who did hit her, but also the abuse she witnessed growing up. Because a lot of the time, as we now know, the person who is in an abusive relationship uh, either experienced that themselves as a child or witnessed that, and it becomes a very powerful emotional imprint in the subconscious mind that's what happens in relationships.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Well, imagine I'm just, can't stop thinking about the fact that she told you, but at least he's not beating me. I mean, that is so profound, so powerful.
Yes, yes. Because basically what it says is, um, I didn't even know that a man and a woman could be in a relationship where the man didn't hit the woman.
Right.
She had no knowledge of that in her experience. And she
Yeah.
wasn't a stupid woman. I mean,
Yeah.
she was a successful executive. But it's a different kind of intelligence. We were talking before about emotional IQ, and emotional intelligence is different than any other kind of intelligence. You can be a master at music. You can be a master pianist. You can be a great scientist.
You could be a great doctor, an attorney, and all
Yes,
of that. Yes.
but that takes a different area of the brain.
Right.
Emotions are different, and so to have emotional intelligence is something that we have not taught in school. There are a number of people now who are trying to get that into schools, and hopefully that will happen. But we're at the very forefront of it. We haven't really haven't talked about it, and our society is pretty much, for the most part, ignorant about what emotional intelligence is.
But there are some books about emotional intelligence, and then when you read them, you see that how basic they are starting to teach how emotions are running a person.
Mm-hmm.
And even those that they are highly educated, education is one thing. We learn about the concept, we need about the field of science, and then we learn how to implement that. But that doesn't mean that we gaining the wisdom of emotional intelligence.
Exactly.
Right.
So what a lot of this boils down to is that when we've had abuse, the three things that cause us to go off course are abuse, which can be physical, emotional, religious, or sexual. Those are the kinds of abuse we identify. The other thing that comes up is neglect, which is its own form of abuse. Neglect can be emotional or physical or spiritual. We can have all of those neglected. And the other form is abandonment. So abandonment can be physical, and can be emotional. And so in abuse, we have one of those, two of those, or three of those, the holy triad or the unholy triad. And so what happens then is if we're raised in a situation where there's one or more of those, we're carrying emotional distress inside of us, negative feelings of fear, feelings of sadness, feelings of anger, feelings of shame. These are all things, and
Feelings of guilt.
feelings of guilt. And so all of these things are negative emotions. And how do we deal with negative emotions? Um, the first question is, do we deal with the negative emotion, or do we push it away? And if we push it away and we just try to move forward without dealing with it, what happens is the negative emotion deals with us.
Yes.
So that's what I say to people when we're doing therapy. And therapy, I'm not gonna lie, therapy for people who have been abused in any way is not a simple process. It's a difficult process. It brings up emotional pain, but at the end of it, you feel freer than you've ever felt in your life, and you feel happier than you've ever felt in your life. But you can't tell that to somebody at the beginning. You could say it, but you also have to say this is going to be a difficult process. It's hard, it's expensive monetarily, and it's hard, and part of you may want to quit. And I can only ask that we talk about it before you quit, because this is a voluntary thing. I'm not going to tell you should or shouldn't, but if it's something that you're carrying inside of you, and you're unhappy, and you've been unhappy, there's a way out of it.
Exactly.
But and in therapy we call it the hard work miracle, because it is hard work.
It is hard work. I mean, people come to therapy, sometimes they have a misconception about what therapy is. It is as though, for example, you're going to side with them and tell them that they are right.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, once they face the reality of what therapy looks like,
Right.
and how it is hard to, in order to gain that personal power, how they need to go first through the process of awareness. Again, we talk about awareness.
Yes.
And then, taking responsibility for the awareness that comes up, that how they have to go through, the changes, and how they have to, change their beliefs, become aware how their negative emotions are running them, and how they're controlling them, and what to do about it.
Right. And so awareness comes slowly, and comes at deeper and deeper levels. So what I say to people is, we're just uncovering this part of what you've been carrying for a long time. We're just uncovering it now, and now you're gaining an intellectual understanding of it. That intellectual understanding is a beginning, right, but it's not an end point. That intellectual understanding has to filter down through the different layers until it becomes a part of you. And I use the example of driving a car. Okay, so when we first drive a car, we are so conscious of everything that we're doing in the car. We're conscious of exactly how much we're giving gas to the engine. Mm-hmm. We're conscious of how often we look in the rear view mirror, look at the side view mirror, how much, whether the car is going straight or whether we're veering off a little to the left or right, the cars on either side of us, the cars in front of us, behind us. It takes all of our attention. And then as we learn how to do it, it becomes more and more relegated to our subconscious. Right. And then after a while, we could go in the car, we could put a cup of coffee down, we can drink the coffee, we can listen to a tape, we can even talk on the phone. As long as we're not holding the phone, we can talk on the phone. Now they have.
I'm not going to be in that car.
now that they have Bluetooth, well, we talk on the phone, yeah, but you can drive safely because it's on automatic, right, meaning that it's gotten down to your subconscious, yes, where you don't have to pay conscious attention to it in the same way that you did at the beginning.
Same thing with how we learn how to ride a bicycle.
Right. Exactly.
Same thing how we learn how to swim, you know.
How we learn anything,
How
really.
we learn anything,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. And once it's learned, we don't have to relearn it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. I mean, we learned something during our childhood that now is impact us negatively because we're following the same recipe of disaster per se.
Right.
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 So going back to that, and the reason we're talking about this now is because what happens when something bad happens to us is that it's a loss. Let's say the parent is a helicopter parent. Doesn't mean they don't love us. Doesn't mean that they're horrible parents, but it means that it's a loss because we didn't get to discover the things that we needed to discover at that time. What happens if the parent is too distant and just says, go out and play and doesn't check on us? That's a loss. It's a loss of having somebody safe and secure that you know is watching out for your safety when you need it, right? So what do losses require of us in order to process it? And what they require of us is the grieving process. That's what they require. When somebody dies, there's a profound loss. Somebody close to us, I mean, it's a profound loss. We may grieve it, or we may not grieve it. If we don't grieve it, all those feelings don't evaporate and go into the ether. Those feelings get lodged in our body and get stored in different parts of our brain, and they wait for another time to get expressed. And if we choose not to express it, if we keep every time, you know, like for example, parents who lose a child, they will keep the room of the child, you know, pristine, just the way the child left it. That's an indication that they haven't really grieved the loss. They're still, part of them is still expecting the child, even though intellectually they know the child is gone, they're still expecting the child to return.
Right.
So grieving is the process of healing, and those people who decide that they're not going to grieve are the people who keep all of that negative energy inside of them.
Exactly.
That's getting manifested in physical illness and in other negative ways.
So why don't we continue with what we are going to be leaving behind today?
Okay.
Next time, because you know, I myself am really fascinated about how you're describing this.
Oh, thank you.
You're very welcome. And I'd like to invite everybody to please join us next week at 3 p.m. on Thursday. That will be next Thursday, yes. And for an episode about human sexuality, we will continue with what kills sex drive. And then also at 4 o'clock, we're going to be talking more about codependency so that we can learn more about this addiction. And until then, don't forget that all you need is love. And thank you for joining us.
All you need is love.
Have a wonderful afternoon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.